There's a piece of information that doesn't get talked about enough in the prepping community. And honestly, it's one of the most validating things I've ever come across for anyone who takes emergency preparedness seriously. FEMA employees, the people who literally respond to the worst disasters in America, the hurricanes, the wildfires, the grid failures, the floods, they go home at night and they prep. Not because their job tells them to, not because it's part of some government program. They do it because they know things the average person doesn't. They've seen what happens when supply chains break down. They've watched communities go without food, water, and power for weeks at a time. They've stood inside the aftermath of a disaster and seen firsthand what being unprepared actually looks like. And then they go home and they quietly make sure their own families will never be in that position. Today, we're going to walk through exactly what those people stockpile. Not the official FEMA recommendations you'll find on a government website. Those are the minimum baseline, the public-facing checklist. We're talking about what preparedness professionals actually have sitting in their own homes. The real list, the one built from experience, not from a PR department. Let's get into it. Before we get to the actual items, there's a mindset shift that's worth understanding. Most people think about emergency prep in terms of surviving a weekend power outage or a bad storm. 3 days of food, a flashlight, some bottled water. That's the civilian version of preparedness. FEMA professionals think in a completely different time frame. When you spend your career watching what happens during a major disaster, you stop thinking in days and start thinking in weeks, sometimes months. Because the disasters that actually test a community, the ones where outside help takes a long time to arrive, they don't resolve in 72 hours. Hurricane Katrina stretched into weeks. Puerto Rico after Maria stretched into months. The Texas freeze of 2021 caught people completely off guard in a state that thought it would never face that kind of infrastructure failure. People who respond to those events don't come home and buy a 3-day kit. They build something much more serious. And the items on their list reflect that longer horizon thinking. The first category is water. And this is where the FEMA professional approach diverges sharply from the standard public advice. The official recommendation is 1 gallon per person per day for 3 days. That's fine as a bare minimum. But anyone who has worked a major disaster knows that water infrastructure is often the last thing to come back online. Pipes burst. Treatment facilities lose power. Contamination spreads. In a serious regional disaster, you could be looking at 2 to 4 weeks before you have reliable, clean tap water again. FEMA employees who take home prep seriously don't just store water, they store a way to make water. There's a meaningful difference. Stored water runs out. Water production capacity doesn't, as long as you have a source. The item that shows up consistently in this category is a high-quality gravity water filter. Not a basic pitcher filter that takes out some chlorine and improves taste. A genuine emergency filtration system capable of making water from streams, rivers, and rainwater safe to drink. The kind of filter that removes bacteria, protozoa, and, when combined with a separate treatment, viruses as well. These run anywhere from $60 to $200 depending on the model. They filter tens of thousands of gallons over their lifespan. And for someone who has watched communities run out of bottled water within the first 48 hours of a major event, a gravity filter is not optional, it's fundamental. Beyond filtration, they also keep water storage that goes well beyond the recommended minimum. Large food-grade containers, 55-gallon barrels for those with space, And in some cases, the understanding that a water heater holds 40 to 80 gallons of drinkable water that most people never think about in an emergency. The takeaway: water storage plus water production capability. Both, not one or the other. The second thing that consistently shows up is a much more robust food supply than the public recommendation suggests, organized around specific principles that most people don't think about. The first principle is caloric density. In an emergency, especially one involving physical stress, cold temperatures, or manual labor, your caloric needs go up significantly. The foods that emergency professionals stockpile tend to be calorie-dense: white rice, dried beans, oats, cooking oils, nut butters. These are not exciting foods. They are efficient foods. A 50-pound bag of white rice stores for 25 to 30 years in a sealed container and contains roughly 80,000 calories. That's meaningful food security for a family. The second principle is rotation. FEMA professionals don't just stack food in a corner and forget about it. They build what's called a first-in, first-out system. New purchases go to the back. The oldest items come forward for daily cooking. This means nothing expires, nothing goes to waste, and the pantry is always stocked. The third principle is nutrition balance. Caloric density matters, but so does actually getting the nutrients your body needs under stress. This is why canned vegetables, canned fish, and meat, multivitamins, and salt are all taken seriously. Salt in particular is something most people understock. It's a preservative, a cooking essential, and under serious physical stress, your body needs it. Emergency responders understand this. There's also a category most people skip entirely: comfort food. This sounds frivolous, but it's not. When you're dealing with a stressful situation over a period of weeks, morale matters. A bag of coffee, some chocolate, hot sauce, instant soup packets. These things have outsized psychological value when everything else is disrupted. Experienced disaster professionals know this, and they make space for it in their stores. The third area is power and light, and this is where the FEMA professional list gets interesting. The standard advice is keep some batteries and a flashlight. What disaster responders actually maintain at home is much more layered. The first layer is simple: multiple light sources, well distributed through the home. Headlamps rather than flashlights, because hands-free light is dramatically more useful during an actual emergency. LED candles for ambient lighting. Backup batteries in quantities that seem excessive until you actually need them. The second layer is a portable power station. These are battery banks large enough to charge phones, run small appliances, power CPAP machines, and keep essential electronics going for days. Over the past several years, the technology has improved dramatically, and the prices have come down. A quality unit holds enough power to charge a phone dozens of times and run LED lighting for extended periods. Paired with a small solar panel, it becomes a renewable power source. The third layer, for those who have made a deeper investment, is a generator, but not the kind that runs on gasoline only. Experienced preppers know that gasoline degrades over time and becomes impossible to source during a regional emergency, when every gas station is empty or without power. The professionals who take this seriously often have dual fuel generators that can run on both gasoline and propane, with a stockpile of canned propane that stores indefinitely and is available at any hardware store right now. But here's the thing that separates casual prepping from the FEMA professional mindset on power. They think about what actually needs power in an emergency. Not everything. A targeted list, communication devices, medical equipment if applicable, refrigeration for medications, lighting, heating or cooling in extreme conditions. They power those things first and accept that the television and the coffee maker can wait. The fourth category is communications, and this is one where the gap between public advice and professional practice is widest. Most people assume their phone will work during an emergency, and often it will, for a while. But cell networks get overwhelmed within hours of a major disaster. Towers lose power. Infrastructure gets physically damaged, and when the cell network goes down, the average person has no way to receive information or contact help. FEMA professionals almost universally own a no-AA weather radio. This is a dedicated receiver that picks up emergency broadcasts from the National Weather Service and FEMA's Emergency Alert System. It operates independently of the internet and cell networks. It runs on batteries or hand crank power. And in a serious regional emergency, it may be the only way to receive reliable information about what's happening and when to expect help. Beyond the weather radio, many experienced emergency responders also maintain a basic two-way radio setup. Handheld radios that can communicate with neighbors or family members within a short range, without relying on any infrastructure at all. During the Texas freeze, some neighborhoods coordinated entirely on two-way radios when phones became unreliable. There's also a growing number of professionals who have obtained a ham radio license, which opens up access to a global amateur radio network capable of communicating across vast distances with no infrastructure dependence. This is a deeper investment of time and money, but for someone who has seen true grid-down scenarios play out, it's not an unusual choice. The fundamental mindset here is: do not assume that any communication infrastructure you rely on today will be available during the emergency you're preparing for. Plan for the worst case, and you'll be covered for everything above it. The fifth item on the professional list is something almost nobody talks about in mainstream prepping content, and it's arguably the most important one. Documentation and financial preparedness. When FEMA professionals prepare for an emergency, they think about what happens not just during the event, but after it. And the people who suffer the most in the recovery phase are often not those who lacked food or water. They're the people whose financial and legal lives became complicated because critical documents were destroyed or inaccessible. Birth certificates, social security cards, passports, property deeds, insurance policies, medical records, prescription information, vehicle titles. The documents that prove who you are, what you own, and what you're entitled to. Every emergency professional keeps copies of these documents. Ideally, both a physical set in a waterproof, fireproof bag and a digital set stored securely in the cloud or on an encrypted drive that can be accessed from anywhere. During a disaster, being able to prove your identity and your ownership of property is not a minor convenience. It is the difference between getting help and being left in bureaucratic limbo for months. Cash is also part of this category. Card readers stop working when power goes out. ATMs go offline. In the immediate aftermath of a major disaster, cash is often the only way to purchase anything from vendors who are still operating. FEMA employees who prep seriously keep a meaningful amount of cash at home. Not thousands of dollars necessarily, but enough to cover several weeks of essential purchases if the banking system becomes inaccessible. The sixth area is first aid and medical supplies. And again, the professional standard is dramatically higher than what most people consider. A standard first aid kit, the kind you buy at a drugstore, is useful for minor cuts and headaches. It is not adequate for a situation where medical facilities are overwhelmed, roads are impassable, or you are days away from professional help. Emergency responders build medical kits that can handle more serious situations. Wound closure strips and suture kits for deeper lacerations. Tourniquet, the real kind, a cat tourniquet or similar device, not a piece of rope, for controlling severe bleeding from limb injuries. Hemostatic gauze for packing wounds. Chest seals for penetrating chest injuries. Splinting material for broken bones. A blood pressure cuff and thermometer for monitoring health over time. And critically, a manual on how to use all of it. The Wilderness First Responder Handbook or a similar field medical reference. Because equipment you don't know how to use is just expensive clutter. Beyond trauma, there's the medication side. A 90-day supply of any prescription medications at all times, rotating them as new prescriptions come in, is a standard that most FEMA professionals try to maintain. Over-the-counter medications in depth, pain relievers, antihistamines, antidiarrheal medications, antacids, electrolyte packets. The things that become impossible to find within hours of a major emergency announcement. There's also a category of medical supply that applies specifically to the person's household. If someone in the house uses insulin, that storage and refrigeration plan needs to exist. If someone has a heart condition or severe allergy, additional medication and equipment matters. The professional approach is to do an honest medical assessment of everyone in the household and plan specifically for their needs, not just generic needs. The seventh area is tools and mechanical capability. After a major disaster, professional help may take days or weeks to arrive. In the meantime, things break. Trees fall on houses, pipes freeze and burst. Structural damage happens. And the people who can address those problems independently are in a fundamentally different position than those who can't. FEMA professionals tend to maintain a tool set that goes well beyond a basic home kit. A quality hand saw for cutting through debris when power tools aren't viable. A come-along or mechanical winch for moving heavy objects without machinery. Pry bars and bolt cutters, heavy-duty tarps, and the supplies to secure them. Roofing nails, staple guns, duct tape in quantity, because a tarp over a damaged roof protects everything inside until real repairs can happen. Work gloves in multiple sizes are something that emergency responders universally recommend. Debris removal is the dominant physical activity in the aftermath of most natural disasters, and bare hands are not adequate. Fuel storage, with the right stabilizers added, is another area where professionals invest. Gasoline with fuel stabilizer can store safely for a year or more. Having 10 gallons of stable fuel means you can run a generator, fill a vehicle to evacuate, or power essential equipment without competing for gasoline at a station that may not exist after a major event. The eighth and final area is something that genuinely separates the most prepared people from everyone else, and it costs almost nothing. It's knowledge. The most effective preppers, including the professionals who do this for a living, invest heavily in skills. Not just equipment, because equipment can be lost, stolen, damaged, or simply run out. Skills stay with you. What kinds of skills? The ability to cook without modern appliances. Basic wound care and first aid. The ability to navigate without a phone. Knowledge of local geography, where the waterways are, where the high ground is, what roads lead out of the area, an understanding of which plants in the local area are edible and which are not. Basic mechanical knowledge for maintaining a generator or a vehicle under field conditions. The professionals in this field also invest in community. They know their neighbors. They have conversations, not necessarily about prepping specifically, but about capabilities. Who has a medical background? Who has mechanical skills? Who has agricultural knowledge? Because in a serious, extended emergency, a prepared individual is much better off than an isolated one. The communities that fare best after major disasters are almost never the ones with the most individual resources. They're the ones with the most social cohesion, the ones where people know each other, trust each other, and work together. That is a preparation that no product, no pantry, and no supply list can replicate. So let's pull this together. Water production capability, not just water storage. A food supply built around caloric density, long shelf life, rotation, and actual nutritional balance, with room for comfort. Layered power that accounts for what actually needs to be powered during an emergency. Communications that don't depend on cell infrastructure. Documentation and financial preparedness that protect you during the recovery phase. Medical capability built for real injuries and real medical needs, not just minor inconveniences. Tools and mechanical skills to address physical problems when professional help is unavailable. And community, the relationships and knowledge that multiply the value of everything else. This is not the 3-day kit. This is the real list. The one built from experience watching what actually goes wrong. The good news is that none of this requires a massive upfront investment. Every item on this list can be built gradually, a little at a time, integrated into a normal household budget over months or years. The people who are most prepared didn't build their systems overnight. They added one thing at a time, consistently, until the sum of those choices added up to something genuinely significant. You don't have to be in the disaster response business to think the way these professionals think. You just have to decide that your family's safety is worth the same attention they give theirs. Start with water, then food, then light. Build from there. The time to prepare is always before you need it.